obviously, this is sort of happening in the context. This is happening in the context of the Bradley Manning trial, and you said that really what this guy Snowden has done, or is and what Bradley Manning did, is sort of turn the tables on what government has been doing to us. And I was curious if you could elaborate on that as well.
Sure. Well, there's now a government class.
Right.
There's a class of people with security clearances who can dip in to your privacy at will without a warrant,
Right.
Under certain circumstances. It's not that they can necessarily listen to your phone calls without a warrant, but there are various forms of surveillance that they can put people under at will. And so essentially there's a class of people, because of their government connections, and many of these, by the way, are contractors.
Right.
They have security clearances, but they're being provided to the government by private firms. So it's not just government employees. So what you might call the surveillance.
The leaker himself. I mean, he was an employee at Booz
Yes.
Allen, right?
Yes, that's right. He at the time that he became aware of PRISM, and when he blew the whistle on it, he wasn't a direct employee of the U.S. government. But he says that he could, if Barack Obama was using a Gmail account, that he could just go look at the emails, even of the president. So in any case, this sort of surveillance class exists with security clearances and access to these monitoring technologies. And the rest of us are second class. We don't have access to that. We don't know what they're doing. So, President Obama came out on Friday and said, well, now that this is out, he'd be glad to have a debate. It seemed to me one of the worst moments of his presidency because it was so disingenuous that
Right.
he had not allowed us to have a debate because all of these programs and activities are secret and classified. And indeed, Ron Wyden, who represents Oregon in the Senate, knew about it and could not reveal it to us. He could sort of signal that we wouldn't like it if we knew what was going on, but that was the limit of what he could say. So we couldn't have a debate because everything is classified, and even bringing it up is now being portrayed as a kind of treason. So what these whistleblowers are doing is subjecting the surveillance class to the kind of monitoring and surveillance of them by the public that they do to the public every day.
Yeah, it's a kind of almost informational equivalent of the kind of 99% versus the 1%, and it's an interesting and disturbing parallel. There's two more questions I wanted to get to you on this theme. One, going back to President Obama, I agree with you. I think that it was an incredibly disingenuous and unfortunate moment, but I think it was there's a continuity there. That's the same attitude he's taken on drones and covert actions abroad, which is hold information incredibly tightly, try to keep these programs as under wraps as possible, and then as sort of they emerge, then he kind of adopts this, I want a kind of open society, big debate position. And what do you make of that as a political habit he's making for himself? In terms of every time these things emerge, immediately adopting a position which seems directly contradictory of what he has been, in fact, practicing.
Yeah, well, I like President Obama quite a lot and support most of his policies, but he, like Bill Clinton, really has a blind spot on security issues, and it may come with being in the office. I don't know, but I think he spent a lot of time in Chicago being a community organizer and has been slammed for that background. But what a community organizer does is go to a community and try to help them figure out what they want and how to get it. And so I think when a really controversial issue arises, Obama, and he did this with health care and with gun control and so forth. He instead of being presidential and sort of leading and making decisions and taking on interests, he falls into this community organizer mode, and he says, "Well, okay, so we've got a nation that's divided, and there are different views. What do you really want, and how could we help you to get it?" I think it's just his background that leads him to think that way.
So you think it's his background to sort of adopt this kind of multi-stakeholder and synthesis approach, which is okay. I hear. Okay, okay. I could see. Yeah, that's
and I think it's a flaw in him with regard to being president, because a smart president who wanted health care in the United States would have had a bill written and taken it to Nancy Pelosi and read and said, "Pass this."
Right.
But he didn't. He called the Republicans in and said, "How could we make you happy?"
Right. No, that's precisely, what he did. Absolutely. I mean, I guess the one way that I might push back on that a bit, though, is I do think with healthcare, the process was flawed, but he was pushing it in a certain direction. Whereas it does seem with some of these security policies, almost reading him in retrospect, even when he was critical when he campaigned, was he critical not of any of the substance of these programs, but in the kind of lawless and cavalier way that the Bush administration did them. And he all along has been pretty comfortable about kind of implementing and carrying out these relatively, kind of aggressive approaches to surveillance and covert actions. So that I kind of wonder about.
Yeah, well, he's very devoted to that, and of course he campaigned against Bush that he wasn't using drones enough. So he has a hardline side to him, which people sometimes don't realize. Again, if you were elected a Democratic president after a long time of Republican rule, and the bureaucracy's full of Bush appointees, and you're afraid of information being used against you in invidious ways. This cult of secrecy that he and Holder have, and this intolerance of whistleblowing, and this fear, really, of information being used to manufacture scandals, I think comes out of this long period in the wilderness that the Democrats had, and the awareness that the Republicans are perfectly willing to play these games. And I think there have been public officials who have been damaged by these kinds of techniques.
Right. No, that makes perfect sense. I think the another important question to kind of get to hopefully sort of wrap this section up, though, and I think it's important to reflect on, is it seems to me that, and maybe I'm being a bit like President Obama myself here, but I hear these two kind of dominant threads when we talk about terrorism and whether or not these programs are justified. And then on kind of one extreme, there's the kind of September 11th repeater brigade, and, Al-Qaeda's at your doorstep. Terrorism is the most kind of vital national security threat we've ever faced. And then on the other extreme, maybe there's some people who would tend to, in the process of rightly criticizing some of these policies, I think personally to a degree, overlook the fact that, no, there actually are legitimate and real security challenges that the United States faces from groups like Al-Qaeda, and President Obama does legitimately need to make some hard decisions about. And I'm just wondering what your sort of overall take is now on what is the quality of that threat to the United States right now?
I think the real issue is whether these techniques actually are productive.
Right.
Because I'm of a school with regard to counterterrorism, and I've done consulting on counterterrorism. I'm very committed to it. I'm not bleeding heart liberal in that regard. I think, if we've got evidence that somebody's trying to kill our children, we have a responsibility to act first.
Right.
But I think that police work, of detective work, is how you roll those things up. And the idea that you're going to break up Al-Qaeda by data mining all of Verizon's records for 3 months,
right,
just strikes me as daft. I mean, it's typical of a kind of blind faith in quantitative methods that dominates some of our social science now too, as well as counterterrorism. And while I don't have a security clearance, so I don't know. I mean, I couldn't tell you if any very serious threat has ever been rolled up, because they keep these things secret in this way. I'd be very surprised. And the ones that we know about, we didn't get bin Laden that way.
Right.
We haven't gotten Ayman al-Zawahiri that way.
Right.
The big threats that we know about that have been broken up haven't been because of this kind of surveillance, and even I think big mistakes are made because that's another thing that this kind of surveillance can go wrong easily. For instance, those Yemeni boys up at Lackawanna, New York, they were under email surveillance, and some of them went to a wedding in Bahrain, said it's going to be a really big feast. And, the New York Times revealed that the intelligence analysts were wondering, is feast a code word for a bomb? But no,
Right.
they were going to a wedding. So
Feast
there are all
was a
kinds of
feast.
drawbacks in just casting a wide net.
Right, and I think for that matter, the successes have not been reflected as far as we know in these programs, and the failures have, such as what happened in Boston, were not anticipated by these programs either. So that point is very well taken.